people assume, maybe Michelle, like maybe you did as well, which is so normal, is, well, I have health insurance, it works. Why deal with the hassle of Medicare? But if you can save, a couple $1,000s a year and actually have better health insurance on Medicare, it's like, why not?
Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and we have a great show today. So a lot of times guests come to me from a variety of sources. This particular guest I invited because I was so excited about her work. I've done her work, and I really wanted you to meet her and learn from her because I learned so much from her, and you will as well. So I am going to introduce Emily Gang to you and let you know a little about her, and then we're going to dive into a super interesting conversation. I'm not even going to tell you what it is yet, so you need to stick around to find out. In 2016, Emily left her 7-year position managing risk for Goldman Sachs to study the ins and outs of Medicare. Since then, she's combined her experience and passion for helping people with the way people should make their Medicare decision. Emily has guided over 100,000 people across the country through navigating Medicare. And, I just realized I need my glasses. Guided over 100,000 people from across the country through navigating Medicare rules and insurance company confusion to make the right Medicare decision based on their unique situation. Her expertise in Medicare has gained her national recognition as the Medicare specialist. Emily has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, Yahoo Finance, Retirement Resource Center, and has presented through Thrivent Financial members. And she did a fabulous webinar that I was a part of, and I can't wait to talk about this. Now, I didn't want to tell you exactly what the topic was because Medicare can sound like something that either you're not ready for, you don't really care about, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's actually way more exciting than you realize, and there's a lot more to know than you realize. There was a lot more to know than I realized. And so I really, really want to share this with you, whether it's you looking at it or maybe you have a partner or a parent or somebody else looking at it that you can inform them. So, all right. Well, Emily, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. It's great to be here.
Sorry. It's really great to have you here. I'm going to ask you to tell us a little about how you got into this because you look too young to really care that much about Medicare. But why don't you tell us a little about how you entered this field?
Absolutely. It's definitely not what I thought I'd get into either. But I started my career doing investment banking at Goldman Sachs and really helping the bank and its clients manage their financial risks. And I thought I knew everything about retirement planning and finances and all those things. But it wasn't until my dad was approaching 65 and I was home with him, having a glass of wine like we usually do it when I get home with him. And he goes, Emily, I'm 65 in a few months and there's this thing called Medicare. And, can you just take a look at it, right? Do you have an idea of kind of what I should do, how this whole thing works? And I thought it would be simple, right? I really thought that Medicare would be like signing up for a driver's license. But after kind of dug into the internet research from insurance companies and the government, I was shocked at how confusing it was. And so we turned to the Medicare Coach, who was an independent fee-based consultant to help us navigate Medicare. And I eventually left my career in investment banking to join the Medicare Coach because I found that so many people, whether it be my friends' parents or my parents' friends, were confused as well. And it just seemed to me that it seemed a little silly that we've spent our whole entire life working hard and saving for retirement, but people were making little Medicare mistakes that were costing them tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like, this is not right? Like, Medicare should not be this hard, and it really should be part of our overall financial plan to kind of solidify everything. And so I joined the Medicare Coach, almost a decade ago now, and we have a proven process that you walked through to, again, help people make their right decision, no matter their situation, no matter where they live, their income, their health needs, any of those things that really help you figure out what makes the most sense for you to have that best healthcare and to also protect your retirement savings. Now, Medicare is not sexy at all, but it's such an important decision to really, again, solidify our healthcare options both now as well as in the future.
Thank you. I love that. And it is not sexy to the point where I never paid any attention to it at all. I never thought about, I paid into it my whole life with the whole working, life that I had. But I never gave it any thought. Then I've talked about this a fair amount on the show, but I spent last year, more than last year, taking care of my parents. So I started to get this whole new education on, what it's like when you are dealing with aging people, and Medicare was a big part of their life. And so I started getting, statements and not understanding them. And so the whole thing was a bit confusing. And I started just looking at aspects of our financial life that I hadn't paid any attention to.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds ridiculous because I just signed up for Medicare. So clearly I was at an age where I should have had some light bulb should have gone off about, figuring out what this is. But maybe I was in denial. I don't know. They'd been sending me AARP cards for 10 years. I just throw them in the mail. I don't even open them because, that's not me. So anyway, I sort of reluctantly entered this world in two ways, with my parents and myself. So I'm verging on that time. People are starting to say things to me about it. People are starting to mention it. I'm getting a pile of mail all the time about it. I have no idea what it is. So Emily had a webinar, and it just somehow came to me. Maybe it was Instagram, maybe it was email. I'm not sure. I think it was Instagram, maybe. And I saw it and I thought, I should probably learn a little something here. So I tuned in. It was a great webinar. I watched a lot of webinars. This one actually, despite the unsexy topic, it held my attention better than many more exciting webinars I've seen. So thank you for that. It was really good. And I started to realize this is actually an important and more complicated decision than I had realized. And you can definitely go make some mistakes, which I think was the topic of your webinars, how to avoid those mistakes. And and I signed up for my Medicare Coach and I went through the process with them, which I had not planned to do. But I'll tell you what, I just told you a few minutes ago, what a relief to not have to do all that research myself, to have somebody hold my hand and make these decisions with me and actually research on their own what would be best for me. And it was a very busy month. I had a lot going on. I really probably wouldn't have taken the time, and I could have very easily made some pretty significant mistakes. So I'm going to, give you the floor here to talk more about some of these.
I think you make a good point, right? Because somehow at about 64 at least, or although AARP gets you earlier, but they find you, right? They find your address, they find your phone number, and the insurance companies come in hard as well as our marketing companies. And again, my dad had a stack of mailers and we didn't know who was best. We didn't know if Blue Cross Blue Shield or United or Aetna or Advantage or Supplement or Part. We had no idea.
I didn't even know really why I was getting that stuff. I thought this is a government program. Why are all these private insurance companies coming after me? It was very confusing.
Yeah. And to their defense, the insurance companies, they know how to market, right? They know what people want to buy. They want to have free things and cheap things. But we also, free and cheap don't always mean free and cheap. And so, we and our clients turn to us because they don't want to have an insurance company pushing products or an agent or a broker, right? They come to us for that kind of overarching decision for Medicare. Because to your point, Michelle, right, you're still working past 65, right? And so we're looking at okay, well, what was your other health insurance? But Medicare is more than just picking out a plan. And I talked to a woman the other day who goes, she goes, I picked out a plan. I've been with Blue Cross Blue Shield for so many years. I just want to stick with them. So I picked up this Advantage plan that happened to have a zero premium. My doctors took it. It seemed great. But a few months later, she had to have a knee surgery unexpectedly. And that good plan cost her over $10,000 that knee surgery. Mm-hmm. And it made me sad because while she did her research from the insurance companies, she didn't fully understand how it worked. And that $10,000 bill for her knee was not in her retirement plan, right? And so, I think it's important to not just make a decision, but to make that right decision. And it's more than just picking out a plan in a company. It's about when to apply and your income levels and retirement plans and employer plans and are you moving? Because there are different rules that come into it. And Michelle, you probably heard this with your coach, but and in the webinar as well. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to Medicare is treating it like an employer health insurance plan. Because that's what most of us have always had our whole lives, or even the marketplace, right? The Obamacare plans, because we assume that we can change health care plans every single year, no matter what. But Medicare's not that way. And so when you first join Medicare, we need to be really thoughtful about the long-term implications of those decisions, because while yes, you can make certain changes every year on some plans, the most important change that people usually want to make, which is to go back to original Medicare with a Medicare supplement plan. In most cases, you are not guaranteed to do that. And so I love that you came to us early, Michelle, because we can kind of have those what if questions in the beginning to avoid those bigger, costly mistakes later on that I see happen so frequently. It's not anyone's fault, but the insurance companies don't show you how the whole thing works, because again, their goal is kind of get you in a plan and get that commission. So
yeah, exactly. And thank you for that. And I want to back up a little, because some of the real fundamental basics of this, I'm not sure everybody knows, because I realized how little I knew. I mean, the fact that this is part of your Social Security benefits, I mean, all of that and how things fit together was really fascinating to me. Like, money is so interesting to me because nobody tells us the most basic things. We're at work for all these years putting money into things that we don't understand at all. And why we don't hear about this earlier, I have no idea, but it really needs to change, because it's very unfair to people in the end who still don't understand it. But I'd love for you to give just a couple of the just fundamental, concepts around what Medicare is, where it comes from, what it's for.
yeah.
And I'm going to let you talk in 1 second. What I didn't recognize was what a gift it is. Like, people are like, oh, congratulations, on being eligible for Medicare. And I thought, well, why do I care about this? I have great insurance already. But I was paying a fortune for my private insurance. As an entrepreneur, I pay a boatload of money for private insurance. So actually, I underestimated kind of what it was and the value to me, too. So it's also something to get excited about. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So it started off in the 60s, right? When most people 65 and over could not get health insurance. And so the government came in and said, we're going to create this system called Medicare. It's evolved since then. But basically, it's the idea that we want to guarantee that as people age, they're guaranteed to have health insurance. And so Medicare came to be, and again, it has evolved over the last few decades. Now, I think there's a couple of things. So we start with like the basics, Michelle, is Medicare versus Medicaid. Okay. Medicaid tends to be for low income individuals, while Medicare tends to be for people 65 and over. Now, I just said that Medicare was created to help people be guaranteed health insurance as they get older. But it's funny, right? Because, Michelle, people think that Medicare is for old people. But as we know, 65-year-olds have a very active and healthy life, and they're living longer and longer. And so people could be on Medicare for 40 years. And so Medicare has evolved over the years, and therefore it's impacted our decision as well. So I think there's a couple basics. That's why Medicare exists. That's Medicare versus Medicaid. But you made another comment about Social Security as well. Most people assume that you have to have both at the same time. But technically, Social Security and Medicare usually begin at different times. Everyone is eligible for Medicare at 65. But Social Security is going to be in most cases, 66 in a few months. And so Medicare is a healthcare decision, while Social Security is really a retirement or an income planning decision. And you will get them at different times. Now, the first step that everyone, I think, should be asking yourself at around 64 is, when should I join Medicare? And I kick my webinar off with this, right? Michelle, I'm like, I know this sounds simple and stupid, but too many people get this decision wrong, which impacts a lot of things. And so Medicare rules say by the time you're 65, you either need to be on Medicare or on an employer health insurance plan, which meets Medicare rules. Now, Michelle, in your case, I believe you had a private plan. And so you're doing an employer plan that met Medicare rules. And so in that case, you should join Medicare at 65 to avoid penalties. But the other turn of it, and you alluded to this, is that sometimes Medicare is cheaper. So even if you do have an employer health insurance plan that happens to meet the Medicare rules, you might decide to join Medicare anyway. I usually say that if you're paying more than $250 per month per person on your employer plan, and your deductible is $2,000 or higher, you're usually better off going on to Medicare. Now, it can be a different tipping point if you have a higher income, but that's usually where the tipping point is for most people. And so most people will say that's cheap, right? My health insurance is way more than $250 a month. I should probably look at Medicare. Or people assume maybe, Michelle, like maybe you did as well, which is so normal, is, well, I have health insurance, it works. Why deal with the hassle of Medicare? But if you can save, a couple $1,000s a year and actually have better health insurance on Medicare, it's like, why not? But there's a lot of just scary things around Medicare. And again, with my dad and I, we were just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And we never felt we were really getting the right information until we came to the Medicare Coach. But I think it's important, to your point, to understand the basics of Medicare, why it exists, and why people want to join it. Again, not all Medicare plans are fantastic, but there are some that can be fantastic for your case. So I don't want people to be afraid of Medicare. I mentioned to you earlier that I see a lot of people. I have a friend of mine who the husband and wife were 67 and 66, and the husband had health issues. And the wife kept working because she was afraid of Medicare because her husband needed to have good health insurance. But she came to a point where she had grandkids. She wanted to stop working. So she came to me and she goes, Emily, what do we do? And I'm like, Joe, actually, you're going to save a lot more money on Medicare. And two, Ben will get just as good health insurance, if not better. And so I think it was a relief to them to have an idea, at least, of Medicare is not a bad thing. Medicare will still be taken by their doctors. And Medicare will not break the bank for them. And I think it's understanding those basics to your healthcare, to your Medicare options, that help people get confident with their overall next phase of healthcare. Because it can be good. The horror stories come because people either join at the wrong time or pick the wrong plan because they're being misled by the industry, and that's where things can get really messy. But again, Medicare can be great. I mean, you just joined Medicare, right, Michelle? And so. Right. Have you felt anything yet? I don't think you've used it much either yet, have you?
I have a little bit of a funny story, which I'm not even sure I should tell, but I have a doctor I've had for 30 years who I love. I drive an hour to see her, but she's great. She doesn't even take insurance. So I'm paying a fortune every month for my private insurance. And I would have to pay her out of pocket. So I paid everybody out of pocket because I had a huge deductible. So the whole thing was just a very expensive proposition. But I loved her, and she's known me forever. So anyway, but when and actually your coach, went to my doctors and found out who takes Medicare and who doesn't. I didn't even have to do that. And so despite the fact that she doesn't take other insurance, she is... somehow she is a part of the Medicare world. And so she was so happy because there were like all these tests or whatever that she'd been wanting to do. And I guess secretly she'd been sort of waiting. And so she was just gleeful when I walked in and I had joined Medicare. She gave me about 18 pieces of paper with things to do on them. But so.
And that's a good point, right? Because I see a functional medicine doctor, right? And she takes no health insurance either, so I pay out of pocket to see her, but those tests are different, right? Yeah. Those lab tests that can be expensive, Medicare covers them, right? At least in most cases. And so that's a big amount of coverage that you'd have now that you never would have had before. But who would have thought, right? You would assume, Michelle, that like people assume that the private plan is better than Medicare, but if you know how the system works, you can get really good coverage. And so now you get to go have 18 vials of blood taken from you and it's all paid for, you know?
Right, right, and scans and everything else imaginable. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was fun actually, and it made it, took the sting out of the fact that you have to constantly face that you're 65, which is fine, no problem with 65, but still, sometimes we still think we're 16. So yeah,
I get it. But again, it's so common. Again, we have clients. I have a client who just sold their house and they're sailing on a boat around the world for a year.
Very fun.
Or I have people who are climbing Machu Picchu and doing like amazing like ultra marathons. I think it's the most inspiring group of people because there's a wide range of 65-year-olds, but so many people like you, Michelle, right, who are still active and busy and doing amazing, inspiring things. It's really fun to be on their journey with them on this next exciting phase of life as well.
Well, that brings up a question. Thank you for that. Yeah, and 65, nothing means what it used to mean. 25 doesn't mean what it used to mean, and 65 doesn't mean what it used to mean. So I think we need to drop all of this, actually, this whole age thing, except for the fact that at 65 you are eligible for Medicare. But I was thinking as you were speaking, if you are employed and you do have employer benefits that, you find affordable and you want to keep, I didn't have this issue, but what is the rule for them? Can they sign up anytime if they want to work to 75? Can they then go on Medicare?
Yeah, actually, I had a client. I'm helping out a couple of parents. I'm actually working with the son who's 60. The parents are 85, and the dad just retired a few days ago. Oh, wow. And so he was able to delay Medicare until his 80s because he had an employer health plan that met Medicare rules. And so, again, when we talk about step one, it's do you have an employer health insurance plan that meets Medicare rules? It's usually having to have 20 employees or more, credible prescription drug coverage, as well as not having any Medicare requirement. But then the second question is which one is financially better? So I just talked about my 85-year-old client who joined Medicare for the first time, no problem, because his employer plan met Medicare rules. I have other clients who say the one spouse is 65 and the younger spouse is 60. And so that's where it gets a little bit messy, Michelle, is when the spouses are kind of split up. Because a 65-year-old could join Medicare and retire, but what happens to that 60-year-old younger spouse? Because they can't join Medicare quite yet.
Right.
And so there are other things, again, like the private plans that we can look at, Medishare plans, things of that nature. Or the older spouse might keep working for a few more years. Now, when the younger spouse has the employer health insurance, things are easier, right? But there are some nuances that we need to be thoughtful around when we have employer health insurance. What I hate to see, though, Michelle, is when people pay for both Medicare and an employer health insurance plan. Did you get any of those scary letters from the government that said, like, you must join Medicare or you may be penalized or all?
No, I got one of those scary letters, or maybe it might have been an insurance broker who said this, and I really didn't understand it, actually, like the whole, like there's going to be a fine or something. I never, if you want to talk about that a little bit, how does that come into play?
I just think it's pretty misleading because there's a lot to that may, right? Yeah, you will face penalties if you don't have a Medicare or an employer plan that meets Medicare rules. But with more people working past 65, we need to, one, make sure it meets the Medicare rules, and two, it's cheaper. But a lot of people will be delaying Medicare after 65. What I hate to see, again, is people pay for both an employer plan and Medicare because they can. Not only does it waste money, but it also creates issues later on when that person fully leaves their employer health insurance. And so I think we have to take all of those advertisements, all of those government letters with a bit of a grain of salt, because they don't go into those important details as to why or how or when, which can create assumptions and incorrect steps along the way. But yeah, it's messy. The whole thing is messy, unfortunately.
It is messy. Yeah. And so I think what you do is such a gift to people because you have somebody there with you who's looking at your specific situation and walking you through answering all your questions. I mean, it was just so great to have somebody who knew my particular situation and could answer questions related to me and, and my whatever was going on. So Yeah, you saying it's messy, that is an absolute truth. I mean, there's, and so much in this world of aging especially is really messy. And that's what I learned during last year, which I'm really wanting to write a book about, because so many things that seem like they should be straightforward were so nuanced and messy and hard to find answers to. I mean, it's very complicated when you start. It's like getting online and trying to teach yourself the tax code. It's too confusing.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's one thing too when you're doing it for yourself, right? When you're going into Medicare, Michelle, and you're at least being able to be thoughtful and strategic. But when you step into your parents' situation, right? And you're like, what did I inherit, right? Like, I'm dealing with them aging. I'm trying to get them health care. I have no idea what they picked or how it works or what's going on. And I think that whole thing can be a lot too for children. I think for myself, right? Like thinking of my parents, you hope that everyone's healthy for forever. But I hope that if they're not, we at least are covered. So I don't have to deal with the drama, the maze then. And so, I mean, did you have a lot of issues with your parents walking into their healthcare? And was it more questions or issues, or kind of what was your experience there?
Well, it was confusing to me because I didn't know anything about Medicare, and they were both on Medicare, and they'd made their own choices. Fortunately, my parents were they're pretty savvy with this stuff, especially they were savvy with investments, savvy with how they chose things. My dad was he was a scientist, so he would dive into all of these things, and so they chose, I think, well. But still, I would get statements I couldn't read. There would be some charges that we were supposed to pay. I didn't know why, but I never had time because I was taking care of them. And it was a pretty dramatic situation for a year. That was like, I just tabled it. I'm like, someday I'll figure out how all of this works. And right now I'll just pay what I need to pay. And I didn't have time for it. So, getting this education earlier too would have been nice. I would have understood all this mail I was getting. I mean, I've got 5 inches of it like stacked on a table that I never did actually go through. And they went through a lot of health things. They were in and out of the hospital. They were, all kinds of things were going on. And so I did notice how astronomical the bills were and how Medicare did seem to take care of the bulk of it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's good because sometimes doctors forget that there's a lag and they'll send people bills.
Yeah.
And people will pay the bills, and it's like, hold up, right? It's just a whole new ball game in a lot of ways, which I think surprises people as well.
Yeah. There's an awful lot to know. I actually had a guest, quite a while ago, who was talking about that. He was a retired insurance guy, and he was talking about, when you first get bills, make sure you don't pay them, especially hospital bills, because they, things haven't processed yet. And it's hard sometimes to know, like you read them and it looks like maybe things have. And so anyway, it was very complicated. And then, without wanting to get too deep into this, there are things like hospice care, which is covered by Medicare and changes the game for certain things. And so, yeah, it's not the most pleasant conversation. But again, being informed takes so much of the stress off. When you don't understand it and you're in the midst of it and you really don't have time then to do the research, you really wish you'd kind of learned about it beforehand. So,
well, I always like, we hope we never need it, right? We hope we never need other types of insurance, but people work with you, right, too, Michelle, to have that to reach that money goal, to have that freedom, to have that ability to kind of live your dreams. And I feel like by getting at least Medicare kind of solidified, it helps keep all the work that you've done even more secure, right? It makes sure that you kind of put up those fences to find I have to go have a knee replacement, but that's not going to ruin my plan that I have for my money overall, or ruin my goals that I have for XYZ, right? I'm not going to have to forfeit taking my grandkids on a trip to Disney World because I have to go pay for my knee replacement, right? By at least having that Medicare set up correctly, you're able to at least allow your money to do more fun things for you, to again live that life that people want to have, right? It's just money's just a tool. And I think people would rather spend their money getting on a trip to Disney World with their grandkids than on a knee replacement, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, gosh, you forget things. You're reminding me. When I was trying to help my parents, my dad had a University of Texas retiree healthcare program. And it was a Medicare PPO. And there was like a little shift that happened. And instead of going directly to Medicare like you used to, you would have to go through Blue Cross Blue Shield, who was nothing more than just like the processor in between, so that you could get your Medicare. But I can't believe I forgot this. This was so frustrating because none of the doctors or hospitals or labs or anybody understood that. They all thought that, they had this Blue Cross and Medicare was like a secondary. It was so confusing to them and I didn't understand it. So I'm on the phone with them. I spent countless hours telling them that, yes, my parents were, in fact, eligible for Medicare. It was just a weird setup, and then I'd have to have them call Blue Cross. But I forgot all about that. It was one of the most frustrating parts of this whole thing because they kept getting turned down for, home health care because, we don't take whatever, and you're not part of Medicare. It was a big to-do. I've totally forgot about it till you just brought that up.
And that's why it's nice. Look, and I love some retiree plans. It sounds like they probably had a retiree plan that worked alongside Medicare. Mm-hmm. And retiree plans can be great, but again, it can get really confusing too. And the billing people don't always know. I mean, billing is one of the hardest jobs, right? It's a disaster. And so if you don't know the words to say or the people to point to, it can get really messy as well. But yeah, I mean, Again, I hope that everyone is always healthy, but if not at the Medicare Coach, our goal is to make it simple, right? And make it simple to have good health care that you can navigate through easily as well. Because that's the last thing that you want is they're going to be pointed in 18 different directions, which is, not ideal.
Not at all. And again, that's one of the things, despite talking about the problems, that's one of the things that is a gift, is that if you do have health problems, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience learning about this, if you have health problems and you turn 65, Medicare is, you're going to get your Medicare same as everybody else. It's not like pre-existing conditions will preclude you from getting it. Maybe you can talk about that because that is one of the big, perks.
And I'd love to go into more detail. We don't have the time here, but let's at least start, right? There's there's Medicare Part A and B, which is your main health insurance. And Medicare Part A is your hospital and your hospice. Part B is basically everything else. And there's two different ways to get that. There's what's called the original Medicare route, where you stay with that traditional Medicare and the doctors have negotiated price directly with Medicare. And the second path is Medicare Advantage, where the government is basically assigning your rights to, let's just say, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they are now responsible for all of your health care benefits. To your point, Michelle, we tend to see more issues with billing when people are on this Medicare Advantage path. There tends to be more denied claims, though they don't publicly publish those numbers. But from what we've seen, there's more denied claims over here, so things can get messier. So that's why I said earlier, people tend to want to be on this original Medicare route with what's called a Medicare supplement plan. Again, this is going into more detail than we probably should, but Medicare Part B, which is most of your healthcare, covers 80% of your medical expenses. And so a Medicare supplement plan comes in, also called a Medigap plan, comes in to cover that other 20%, or to basically create a maximum out-of-pocket amount that protects you financially. But the thing here is that in most states, you were only guaranteed to join one of these Medicare supplement plans within 6 months of starting your Medicare Part B coverage. So anyone can join this supplement plan in that first 6 months. But in most states, if you try to join a supplement plan after that 6-month window, you do have to go through that kind of the medical underwriting where they look at your pre-existing conditions. So it goes back to why it's so important to get this right. People want Medicare Advantage when they're healthy because it's cheap, they have free stuff. But when people have health issues, they tend to want to be on original Medicare with a Medicare supplement because overall it tends to be cheaper, and they tend to approve those medical expenses much more frequently and easily. And to your point, Michelle, they're like, well, we don't take Medicare, right? Most people just want to take Medicare because the government pays them. There's less hoops to jump through. It's just a lot simpler for both the provider as well as you. But back to your point, there are these pre-existing conditions around these supplement plans that can make it really hard to get later on. So unfortunately, we have to think about this at 65, even if we might not use it until we're 90 years old.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the really big takeaways from your webinar. And that's, you highlighting the different mistakes people could make. I would have never in a million years understood that or known it. Even if I'd done my own research, it would have been still messy and confusing. So, I just really appreciated that. And, Medicare has all these parts, and I didn't understand all the parts either. We don't even have to get into that, but you get into it really well on your webinar. And each part has some decision making associated with it and some cost associated with it, or not. But it's all really something that I do believe everybody should get educated on and be able to just feel confident. I mean, money and everything financial is so much better when you feel confident about what you're doing and the decisions you're making. And that's a huge aspect. I always ask all my guests about their relationship with money, but you can't feel good in a relationship that you don't feel confident in. And money's the same. So I really just, I commend you for doing this because I think we're toward the end now, and we started out saying it's such an unsexy topic, but the reality is this is like a real win financially, actually. So it should be a lot. Maybe the name just, it has this label that is unsexy, but the reality is starting at age 65, you get to save a whole bunch of money and invest it or do whatever you want with it.
And if you do it right at 65, you're set. Yeah. Like if you just pull off the Band-Aid and be like, okay, I'm going to just do this right now, you're set. It's when people kick the can because they don't need it and they try to get it at 69 or 75 when things start to crumble. It's just rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just do this thing. Let's get it done right the first time and let's move on with our lives,
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a help from my friends because I really, like I said, had never thought about it. And I just started getting these weird emails, either from friends who were turning 65 and they were like, oh, well, woohoo, at least I get Medicare. And I'm like, is that really exciting? But I would, they would tell me that it really is. And so, that helped too, to have people kind of encouraging you to go explore it and get excited about it. So anyway, I think this is great. I really want to encourage people to watch your webinar. So if I don't even know if that's something you do regularly, but it was so helpful to me. And signing up for the coaching that you provide was also so helpful. I mean, we didn't get into the different parts, but when you get into these, the Medigap plans and all of that, again, it's another layer of choices. And I would not have been able to do that. And your coach actually, she told me exactly what to choose. And you know how sometimes it just feels really good to be told what to do by an expert. Yeah. That's
and especially when we don't make any commissions, right? So you know that we're not, it's a completely separate process, which people love. People love that independence, and we love to give it to you. But yeah, Michelle, I try to do one of those workshops at least once a week. Oh. So, and I walk through those 5 steps, right? It's when to join, which program. We talk about Medicare Advantage versus original Medicare. Step 3 is Part D drug plan. Step 4 is Medigap, also called supplement plans. And then 5 is making it official. So you can either get to that free workshop at themedicarecoach.com. There's a link in there to register for that free workshop. But yes, people love it because it cuts through a lot of the noise. And it's what I wish my dad and I had when I was trying to first figure out Medicare on his behalf. So it's all the things that I wish I would have had from the very beginning. So I'm glad that you were there. And again, I love providing value on that session. It's all live. And so you can ask your questions on there as well. So
yeah, thank you. It really was a great, it was a great webinar, and you really know your stuff, and it really comes through. And like I said, you make it really actually quite interesting. So, and you're listening, just knowing this is really valuable. This is stuff I need to know. And, I have a lot of friends now who are like, oh, well, maybe you can tell me and I'm going to direct them straight to your webinar because it's really great. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And doing it every week, that makes it super available to everybody. I will say, do it earlier, probably earlier than I did. People say you can, listen to something like that. I don't know. What do you recommend? I think I kept hearing 3 months ahead, and I was only like 1 month ahead, but
I like to have people join 6 to 12 months before they're 65. So, and the reason is that you're gonna start getting advertisements at about that time. And if we can at least cut through that noise, it will decrease the stress for you as well. And there's things that we can do early on too that but you can apply, Michelle, to your point, you can apply for Medicare officially 3 months before your 65th birthday month. So we want to be ahead of that ideally to again make things go a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because you want to apply early enough so that, I had that little bit of problem where I was a little bit late, and then it's like, when do you drop your other? And, so
Yeah.
anyway, it is a great idea to do it early and
And the
plan.
government can be slow, and you're like, "Where's my card? I joined Medicare 2 days ago." Like,
Yeah.
so anyway,
Yeah.
that's the ideal. But again, better late than never. That's for sure too.
And, to your point, if this has nothing to do with you for another 20, 30 years, you still have your parents to help. And it might be just telling them about it or sitting down and watching it with them. Because if you end up in a position where you're helping your parents at some point, boy, you want to be on the same page. You want to have the same understandings of things and know where the records are kept and know how things work. So, yeah, I think for anybody, it's really great. So,
I agree. We love helping out the kids too. I
Yeah.
mean, we are the kids, right? We're not kids anymore, but we are the kids, and it's good to make sure it's all again buttoned up before things really hit the fan, and we're trying to grab the pieces and put them all together. So
absolutely. Yeah, your time is really valuable at that point. You don't want to spend it trying to learn too many new things.
exactly.
So, and what else do you have on the MedicareCoach.com?
So we have a lot of blogs on there as well. So whether it be, most common topics people have, there's so many free resources on there to kind of get your hands dirty and get to know Medicare if you're not ready for the entire hour and 20-minute workshop as well. So a lot of resources on there to help guide you through the different steps of Medicare to again make it simple and easy for people along the way.
That's great. And any other ways that you like people to contact you if they are looking for help or information?
Yeah, you can give us a call. Our number is 785-537-6225. But Michelle, to your point, I think that the webinar is the best way to get started. We'll send out replays afterwards. You can do it at your own time if you want to, but it's such a good base to how Medicare works that people love to start off with that process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Emily, so much. And I do have to say, after signing up for, the coaching, I do get some really great emails, with more information. And so I feel very well taken care of on that front. So
that's our goal, because you can make Medicare, but then there's more to using it as well. And so we're here to help you figure out how to use it, get the most out of it also, because we've given you this powerful tool. We got to use it correctly though as well. So I'm glad you found those helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's great. So really appreciate you, really appreciate the work you do, and appreciate you coming on today. I know you're super busy, so thank you so much for spending this.
I appreciate it as well. So thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, take care, and thank you again. And audience, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it gave you a few aha moments here about what you could do to either help yourself or help others in your world. And yeah, I would absolutely recommend that you go to the MedicareCoach.com and see what's there for you, even if it's for the future. It's great to just know great people who are out there to help you, because the resources are a fabulous way to learn more and to develop your relationship with money, which you want to always be working on, because it's just one of those relationships that's going to be with you forever. And it changes in your older years, just like real relationships. So really important to stay on top of that. And I want to thank ubngo.com for broadcasting the show from Burbank, California. And you can find the shows on all the podcast platforms, on Roku, on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. And we really hope if you liked it, you share it with your friends and you give us a lovely review if you're so inclined. We would love that. Helps me to keep bringing great guests like Emily onto the show. So thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week.